Earlier today in Finland, an appeals court dismissed hate speech charges against Päivi Räsänen for social media posts that cited a Bible verse and traditional Christian views on marriage and sexuality. Päivi, who is also a member of the Finnish parliament and the country's former interior minister, was cleared of charges along with Bishop Johannes Poilo on the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland. While we celebrate the good news, every Christian must remain aware of the left's continuing use of the legal system to, it's to persecute those with a biblical worldview. And don't think that this is something that happens in other countries. Joining me now to discuss this is Kristen Waggoner, President and General Counsel of Alliance Defending Freedom, who coordinated Päivi's legal defense. Kristen, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Well, thank you for having me.
So congratulations on today's news. This is I think it was a total of 4 years that this has been going on. Give us your thoughts on this case and what this may lead to.
Well, it is a monumental victory. I mean, 4 years, they say the process is the punishment. 4 years of criminal penalties, of those penalties hanging over Päivi's head, of not knowing what the future holds, of interrogations and charges. In fact, the charges that were filed against her were criminal in nature under the criminal code for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Simply being labeled as someone who engages in hate speech, whether you're convicted or not, itself carries a punishment. So we're thrilled that Päivi is exonerated today on appeal, but you're right to point out that there's a rise of global censorship that's going on right now, and that we face it here in the United States as well.
Now, Kristen, she said that she was hoping that this would set a precedent that would provide protection for others. It may for a while, but I'm concerned. I mean, this was one state prosecutor who simply had, even though the district court unanimously acquitted her before, this was appealed, taken to an appellate court, this was all driven by one state prosecutor. All you have to do is have one person in this process that has wants to go on a Christian hunt, and you're going to end up with another case like this.
It does set national precedent, and so that national precedent should apply to others in this situation. But you're exactly right that rogue prosecutors can choose to try to distinguish that precedent in the future. And I do think it also points out the importance of citizen standing, though. Many of the nations throughout Western civilization have had constitutions or laws that protect free speech, religious freedom, but those laws aren't worth the paper they're written on if the citizens become apathetic or don't enforce them, as Päivi did here.
That's really important, and that's important here in the United States as we see this infringement upon religious freedom. And religious freedom, just to restate the obvious for those of us here, religious freedom is not just the ability to worship as you choose, it's the ability to live out your faith, instructed by your faith. And if we don't have people in this country willing to stand up when they're challenged or that freedom is infringed upon, we do lose it.
Absolutely. We also not only lose the right to be able to speak about and to live out the truth in our own lives, but we lose the right of self-government, and we blur the lines with dictatorships and give totalitarian and authoritarian regimes power to silence the truth and silence debate on issues. So it's a very, very dangerous precedent that this prosecutor tried to set here. And I think it's also worth pointing out who they went against. They tried to convict of crimes a longstanding member of their parliament, a very public official, very well loved, recently reelected. So they're sending a message to the average person in Finland that if we can get her, we can get you as well.
Right. Well, it's intimidating. It has a very chilling effect. I recently met with the Finnish ambassador to the United States. We discussed this case. He was very tight-lipped about it. But I'm curious as to whether or not they may go back and review their process, allowing a state prosecutor to go after and essentially persecute someone for 4 years, knowing that the court unanimously threw this out.
I sure hope that they do. I mean, these laws that essentially create hate crimes out of what they call hate speech are very vague, they're subjective, they can be interpreted and applied in all kinds of different ways. They're very destructive and dangerous, and we see them proliferating throughout Western Europe. The UK right now has a law now that prevents silent prayer outside of abortion clinics. In Mexico, we see others who are being prosecuted as well for their speech. And we certainly are seeing the beginnings of it here in the United States in a variety of areas. So we have to stand. And I think it's worth noting the prosecutor can still appeal this verdict as well.
Right.
And we're hoping that the prosecutor general will choose not to do so, though.
I think the pressure is going to be tremendous for them not to do that, but we've got to remain vigilant. Kristen, final question for you. ADF does a great job, and in most of the cases, and I don't know what the percentage is, it's got to be 99, 98% of the cases you take up, you win. But you've got to have people willing to fight, stand up, take the public pressure, criticism, but in the end, we all win. Your final thoughts on the state of religious freedom and what people in this country need to be doing?
I'm hopeful about the state of religious freedom and free speech because I do think that believers in particular are waking up to the need to stand not only for their own rights, but the rights of future generations. And what we see is that when we stand with courage and boldness on the truth, which is something you've done for so many years, Tony, I think that God honors that. It may not be in the timing or the way that we want in a particular moment, but over the long haul, he will honor it. And I've seen that play out in our cases with our clients time and time again, including with Pivy in this case.
Well, we are so grateful for all of you at Alliance Defending Freedom, knowing that you're there to represent believers and those who appreciate the Constitution and our freedoms in the courts. Kristen Waggoner, thanks so much for joining us today.